Hello, I'm Jared and you're about to listen to a BBC Trending podcast. But before you do, just a heads up, it's audio, only audio. So stick this on while you're cooking dinner, walking the dog or in the bath, or just stare at a blank screen for 23 minutes. We're trying something new here and we hope you'll like it. Enjoy.
No, the music you're listening to isn't from a gig, and it's not a chant at a football match. What you're listening to now are 25 members of a South African political party singing as they warm up for a TV debate. Not many countries do politics like this, which is why we've come to South Africa.
Now, over the last 4 years, young people have won concessions from the South African government with their Fees Must Fall social media campaign opposing university fees. So we're here to see if that energy is going to affect the voting in this year's general election. The vote is on May the 8th, and in the run-up, we're following two young activists from Johannesburg with opposing views.
We've picked these two because the two parties that they support, the African National Congress and the Economic Freedom Fighters, are the ones who are particularly popular amongst young people and on university campuses. Meet Sankara.
We need more young people to be represented in all structures of government so that we have better young people. Young people have energy, have stamina. They are there to confront issues direct.
And this is Thapi.
We need an organization that says, no, black child, we are here for you. We want to uplift you. We want to bring back dignity.
This is the BBC Trending podcast, where we take an investigative look at the world of social media. I'm Jonathan Griffin.
And I'm Anisa Subedar. Now, 25 years ago, for the first time in the country's history, citizens of all races were able to vote in South Africa's general election. Nelson Mandela won the presidency, and ever since then, the ANC, or African National Congress, have enjoyed an electoral monopoly. At the last election, the ANC picked up 62% of the vote. Their closest rival was the Democratic Alliance, who got roughly a third of the ANC's numbers. The next biggest party were the Economic Freedom Fighters on 6%. But no one is quite sure how the ANC is going to do at the ballot box this year. The party is widely expected to win again, but there is a chance it could lose their majority.
Yeah, that's because the landscape here has changed a lot since people last voted in 2014. Back then, voters chose President Zuma, but he resigned after a string of corruption allegations. Now the ANC is led by Cyril Ramaphosa, who's promised to target corruption.
Many older voters traditionally vote for the ANC because of their role in ending apartheid. But this year, about a fifth of South Africa's registered voters are under the age of 30, and who they'll vote for is much harder to predict.
And there's another reason that this election is really different. Since 2015, there have been mass student protests like Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall and Afrikaans Must Fall on university campuses. Now, we covered those viral campaigns on Trending when they first started. They tied thousands of students' concerns about university finance with worries about the nature of the educations they were receiving and whether they were really accessible to all. That's both in terms of economics and language.
4 years on from the start of those protests, and the campuses have turned into a hotbed of political activism. Many of the leaders of the initial movement are now running as candidates in the election, and many more are out canvassing for votes, both in the streets and on social media. So how are these young activists changing politics in South Africa?
It's 5:30 a.m. on a Friday morning in Alexandra, a densely populated township in Johannesburg. Like most townships, Alex, as it's known, is poor and underdeveloped. Hundreds of thousands of black people live here, many of whom live in the 20,000 metal shacks that are crammed together, lining most of the roads. This area used to be one of the very few places in the country where black people could own land. Today, thousands of workers who live here have to catch a bus before the sun comes up to make their way to the jobs in the inner city.
We're at a bus station just before dawn to speak to a dedicated activist who's head of the ANC Youth League here in Alex. He introduces himself as Sankara.
On the 8th of May, we're voting the ANC, all of us. On the 8th of May, it's a public holiday. We're voting the ANC.
We meet him at the top of an escalator. He's wearing a bright yellow ANC hat and matching T-shirt. This morning, he and fellow activists want commuters to pledge their support for the ANC. He says that he became actively involved in the party while studying at Tswane University of Technology in Pretoria, which is an hour's drive to the north from Johannesburg.
I became a student in TUT in Ga-Rankuwa campus, whereby I became actively involved in politics as well. And then I took that energy and strength and came back to Alex. The conditions, the people, the surrounding attracted me to be involved in politics. And I saw the ANC as the organized formation to participate in.
Townships like Alex, home to black working-class communities, have traditionally been the heartlands of the ANC vote. But Sankara tells us this year the ANC can't take those votes for granted, and in order to mobilise voters, he's going to go knocking door to door.
And there's a good reason for that. Mobile phone data is often unaffordable for people living in the townships, which makes social media campaigning difficult. Some South Africans have been pushing a data must fall campaign on social media, but until prices drop significantly, the best way to reach low-income communities is by doing things the old-fashioned way, and that means door knocking.
People are no longer voting because of historical battles. People are no longer voting because of the achievement of new democracy. So it's not about the person next door. You can tell them that we've built more than 1.2 million houses, but if he still or she still stays in a shack, what difference are you going to do?
It's time to join the rest of the ANC members on their door-knocking campaign around the streets of Alex.
The weather is absolutely baking. The streets that Sankara has been assigned to door knock on are dense and dusty. Single-storey houses made from concrete, corrugated iron and grey breeze blocks are crammed in next to each other using every available inch of space. While one of the ladies writes down her phone number on an ANC contact list, I take the opportunity to ask her elderly friend how she'll vote.
I vote for ANC because most of the time, on the old days, we saw there's any changes there.
I asked Sankara if this morning's door knocking has been beneficial for the ANC. He says it's really the only way to reach people in the townships.
Look, others on social media, they're not there. I mean, look at that guy, he's using a different phone. Remember, we've got data issues in the township. We've got not a lot of people not having money to buy data interaction. Others not being clued up, especially our strong voter holds. They are not clued up in terms of voter registration and all these other things. So it becomes a bit difficult. But this process, it's what gives us the strength. We trust this process more than any other process.
Thapi is a university student and an activist for the Economic Freedom Fighters, a self-described radical left-wing party. They're currently the third largest party in both houses of the South African Parliament, after the ANC and the DA. When the party formed in 2013, polling found that almost half of their support came from the under 24-year-olds, and 99% of their support was black. Since then, they've been very active during the Fees Must Fall protests, and on university campuses they seem to be the biggest rival to the ANC. In 2014, they got 6% of the vote. So far, polling suggests they may get significantly higher than that this year.
Thapi says there's a big split in South African society between the old people governing and the young people they represent.
Our parliament majority of the members are 66 and above, and they're trying to address our issues, but they're not going through those issues. Hence why movements such as Fees Must Fall, they cannot sympathize with us because most of them have graduated and they do not understand the issues that we face in the institutions of higher learning. But a political party like the EFF understand what we go through because most of the party leaders have just graduated or they're still studying. So they understand the things that we go through, and they understand the notion of free education.
Thapi says the EFF's focus on the black majority is another reason why they resonate with her.
It's not that we hate white people, it's just that we love black people more because we've never been showed love. This country has never loved us that much. So we need an organization that says, no, black child, we are here for you. We want to uplift you. We want to bring back dignity. And we want to say that the color of your skin does not determine the type of job you have or how much you'll be paid or the way you're going to be treated.
One of the EFF's founding principles is land reform. The party say they want government to take some land without compensation for equal redistribution. That includes abandoned buildings, mines and urban land owned by state companies, but it also refers to farmland.
During colonisation and then apartheid, black South Africans were dispossessed and denied access to land. But a government audit in 2017 found white people, who make up less than a tenth of the population, still own 72% of the farmland held by individuals.
The EFF's leader, Julius Malema, says things could turn ugly if land is not returned to black people. The EFF also want to nationalise mines and banks, plans that are popular with young people and low-income communities.
A few days later, Thapi takes us to the quiet, affluent suburb of Randburg, where high walls and gates conceal expensive houses usually owned by white people. Now, this is not the EFF's heartlands in terms of race or income, so Thapi explains why we're here.
We came to an area like this because if it was race-based, then we would have only done our door-to-door campaigns in a black community. But in this case, we're just asking and pleading with ordinary citizens like ourselves to vote for the EFF. In order to get change, we need the participation of all South African citizens. They'll play a huge role in helping to kind of just eradicate the income-wealth gap.
On the steps of one school, the EFF door-to-door tried to engage with a white middle-aged woman.
So, do you understand the ideology? Do you support the ideology, even though maybe you don't like Julius as the leader of the EFF?
Well, I think because he's the front of EFF and what he stands for and how he wants to nationalise a whole lot of companies and private companies. I don't
what
enjoy
does that
his policies.
mean for you?
Well,
what does that mean for you?
As a white person,
yes.
I think if Julius Malema was running our country, that it would be a problem.
Really?
For business, for economy, for his ideologies I don't agree with.
Despite the EFF's seemingly persuasive efforts, the lady later tells me she will be voting for another party. And that's a theme consistent with several of the other middle-aged white people we meet in Randburg. They seem to take exception to the EFF's leader, Julius Malema. Malema is regarded as a controversial figure in South Africa. He regularly insults his political opponents, and in the courts, he's been convicted of hate speech on several occasions.
And yet, that's not to say that the EFF don't find any joy on the streets of Randburg. They start by getting the contact details from domestic workers, gardeners, painters and decorators, but by lunchtime they've managed to sprinkle in a few white millennials too. And while Julius Malema was off-putting to the white middle-aged woman who we met on the steps of the school, to a millennial black man doing his shopping at the supermarket, he is the reason he'll be voting EFF.
I love Malema.
There it is.
You love Malema?
Yes.
Why do you love him? What does he represent to you?
Because we've got the right things, the truth.
Thapi also invites us to join her and her EFF comrades at a television debate between some of South Africa's biggest political parties at Constitution Hill, a former prison complex which now hosts the country's constitutional court.
The music you can hear belongs to the economic freedom fighters. 25 of them gather in a circle before the debate, dancing and clapping, all wearing red, some with T-shirts that say economic freedom in our lifetime, others with red workers' boiler suits, and with red flags on and red berets on their heads too.
25 members of the ANC also arrive. They're wearing parrot yellow and wrapping flags around their heads, and 5 other parties dress up too, all in T-shirts matching their party's colours.
The TV debate itself is a robust affair. For 2 hours, the 7 party representatives put forward their case and attack their rivals. At every advert break, the audience, made up of members of each party, sing, dance and wave flags. The atmosphere feels more like a carnival than a political debate.
As it comes to an end, I catch up with Dr. Trevor Ngwane, a senior lecturer and researcher at the University of Johannesburg. He explains why this general election is different to previous ones.
So this election is important because due to certain crises in the country, such as with energy, power failures, especially with corruption, many top politicians have been fingered for corruption. People feel that there's something going wrong. So now, for the first time, there's a real possibility that the African National Congress, the party of Nelson Mandela, might actually get less than 50%. I don't think it's going to happen, but it is a possibility. And then if that happens, for the first time after independence, after getting our national liberation, we'll have a coalition government. And usually in Africa, in post-colonial societies, it takes a long time for the party which led the struggle to actually get out of power. But it might happen here in South Africa.
And according to Professor Ngwane, some of the shake-up of South African politics can be directly attributed to viral student movements, such as Fees Must Fall.
Basically, the students said, we are busy saying we are free, but we students, we don't feel that we are free. So the students have played a very important role in actually shaking the ANC and pointing fingers at it and demanding that it should improve the way it's governing the country.
Coming up, we're going to hear more from our two political activists, Sankara, who backs the ANC, and Thapi, who's for the EFF, as we bring them together in a very lively debate. Is there anything they'll agree on? 4 years ago, dissatisfaction over tuition fee hikes and Eurocentric curriculums at the University of Witwatersrand led to some of the biggest student protests in the country for decades. The hashtags Fees Must Fall and Roads Must Fall went viral, and protests became national and the coverage became international. The result was that the government agreed to a 1-year university fee freeze, and a new generation of young people became politically engaged.
Given the recent history that Wits University has witnessed, we thought this was the perfect place to bring our two activists together to meet and discuss the future of their country. When we met, they were sporting their own party's signature colours, a yellow cap and a t-shirt to represent the ANC for Sankara, and a red beret for Thapi to back the EFF.
It was an overcast day, and as the dark grey clouds started to gather above us, it soon became clear neither activist was prepared to pull any punches. Thapi started with a criticism of the ANC that we heard a lot from EFF supporters, that they've been way too slow to improve conditions for black South Africans.
Do you not think you're too broad to a point where you actually compromise the lives of the majority, which is the black individuals?
If you're saying we're too careful, because we need to protect the economy, we need to make sure that the economy grows, we need to make sure that people survive, because sometimes...
Then it was Sankara's turn. He gave a criticism of the EFF common amongst ANC supporters, that their radical words are simply not practical.
I believe that the EFF, its interpretation wants to narrow everything to only the African diaspora. In the way that they're doing things, I believe that they're just speaking a lot of rhetoric.
You know, as an ordinary citizen, I have witnessed myself what the EFF has done on campus. EFF, honestly, I have seen them not just being rhetorical, but they've been practical, because they've registered a lot of students here who the system are going to reject. But
the conversation soon moves away from the topic of student registration and onto the subject of youth representation.
When I see the ANC, I see a bunch of old pensioners.
And I want to tell you something.
That's where the EFF is different, because they put in young people where those structures are needed.
Young people within the ANC, you find them in government, in national government, you find them in provincial government, and you find them in local government.
What is your definition of a young person? No, give me a definition of a young person.
A young person by constitution is anyone between the ages of 14 and 35. That's a youth.
But then explain to me why me as an ordinary citizen...
No, young person is subjective, because
no,
an old person can have a young heart, and that person in heart is young.
If they had a young heart, then
They started to talk over each other. The clouds got darker, and the occasional rumble of thunder interrupted things.
The weather now is thundering, and the relationship here seems stormy. Why can't you agree on much today?
The only thing we can agree upon is that, one, they must start speaking realistic matter. On the issue of social grant, they're talking about doubling the social grants.
what's wrong with that?
They
People
can't
can't
even
live off of that social grant.
They
That
can't
thing
even-
is giving
they
peanuts.
And then they were off again, arguing about how much the state should pay to the 17 million people who claim benefits, many of whom come from South Africa's poorest households. But soon the rain pelted down. We all had to run for shelter, and for a brief moment it brought Thapi and Sankara together.
Oh, okay, so it's currently raining right now.
Yeah. Get
Heavily.
blessings.
Yeah, blessings then.
Yeah.
So
We get blessings.
I think it was needed.
For sure.
Yeah, both
Cleanse.
the rain to cleanse and cool us down. So,
Thapi, as an EFF supporter, maintains that her party is the way forward for South Africa and that the ANC have had long enough in power. Sankara, as an ANC member, says that the EFF needs to be less radical in their approach and be more patient for change.
So I asked what they'd learned from their chat.
I do not know everything. No political party is perfect. So you need the criticism of an opposing political party to refine your policies. There's a lot I learned from the ANC about the way they perceive the EFF and how I can better my campaigning as a ground force member to convince another citizen to vote for the EFF.
The elections are only days away now. It's clear the young people that we spoke to are confident that their party is the one capable of bringing change to this country, a country that the World Bank says is the most unequal on earth.
We don't know if the changes Sankara or Thapi want will happen or how long they'll take. But what has been apparent in our time in Johannesburg is that South Africa has proactive, engaged young people ready to take this country onto the next stage of its history, whatever that looks like.
That's it this week for the BBC Trending podcast. I'm Jonathan Griffin.
And I'm Anisa Subedar.
Our thanks to production manager Shannon McCormack. You can use any of our social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, to get in touch. Or if you want to message Trending with your thoughts on this or any of the other programmes, you can email me at jonathan.griffin@bbc.co.uk. From all of us here at Trending, thanks for listening.